thoughts fulfilling. As all Buddhas, I now show their perfect bodies. I Namo incense cloud canopy. I Bodhisattva, I incense cloud canopy. I Bodhisattva, I incense cloud canopy. I Bodhisattva, I Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha. The unsurpassed, profound and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Flower Adornment Sutra, Transcending the World, Chapter 38, Part 1. At that time, the world-honored one was in the country of Magadha at the Bodhimandala in an arana within the universal light palace. He was seated upon the lion's throne of a terrestrial lotuses.
He had perfected wonderful awakening and had ended the two activities forever. He had achieved the state of marklessness. He had dwelt in the Buddha's abode. He had attained qualities identical with those of the Buddhas. He had arrived at the place of non-obstruction. He had attained this stage of non-regression. His actions were unimpeded. He had established himself in the inconceivable, and he could perceive the three periods of time simultaneously.
He constantly pervaded every land. His wisdom was durable such that he understood every dharma. He accomplished every practice and cleared away every doubt. His manifestations were unfathomable. His wisdom was sought by every bodhisattva. He arrived at the state of non-duality, the same ultimate father's sure as all Buddhas, attaining liberation that is identical with all Tathagatas, like that of the Buddhas, extending throughout the Dharma realm and pervading the realm of space. He realized the level and equal ground that has no middle or extremes.
He was with a gathering of bodhisattvas, mahasattvas from various lands in other directions, equal to number of 2 particles of dust in ineffable hundreds of thousands of kotis of nayutas of Buddha lands, all of whom were to attain Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi in a single lifetime. Having the experience wisdom of a bodhisattva, these bodhisattvas were skilled at contemplating every being, teaching and enabling them with the power of experience to abide by the practices of bodhisattvas. They were skilled at contemplating all worlds, visiting the worlds with the power of experience. They were skilled at contemplating the state of nirvana, pondering and fathoming it, and forever severing themselves from frivolous debate, so as to unceasingly cultivate wonderful practices.
They were skilled at gathering in beings. They were skilled at mastering all the countless expedient means, knowing that beings are empty and without substance of their own, and yet not impairing their karmic fruitions. They were skilled at knowing the various differences among beings' tendencies, faculties, states, and skillful means. They could receive and uphold the Buddha Dharma of the 3 periods of time, and having understood it themselves, explain it to others. They abide skillfully in limitless, mundane, and transcendental dharmas, knowing them to be true toward all kinds of conditioned and unconditioned dharmas. They had equal regard, knowing that dharmas are non-dual. Within one single thought, they were entirely able to obtain the collective wisdom of the Buddhas of the 3 periods of time. Within every thought, they were entirely able to display the accomplishment of equal and proper awakening, causing every being to make a resolve to accomplish the path. Knowing the conditions within one single being's mind, they were able to know all being states. Although they had entered the Tathagata's ground of all wisdom, they did not abandon the Bodhisattva conduct. They applied wisdom and experience to whatever they did, yet did so as if nothing had been done. For the sake of every being, they dwell in the world from immeasurable kalpas, but it was difficult for beings to encounter them within an asankhya kalpa. They had turned the wheel of proper Dharma, never failing to teach beings. They had perfected the pure practices and vows of the Buddhas of the 3 periods of time. Such were the immeasurable meritorious virtues they had accomplished. If even all the Buddhas spoke for boundless kalpas, they could never describe them all.
Their names were Universal Worthy Bodhisattva, Universal I Bodhisattva, Universal Transformation Bodhisattva, Universal Wisdom Bodhisattva, Universal Vision Bodhisattva, Universal Light Bodhisattva, Universal Contemplation Bodhisattva, Universal Illumination Bodhisattva, Universal Banner Bodhisattva, Universal Awakening Bodhisattva, and so on.
Such were the bodhisattvas, as numerous as particles of dust in the clusters of ineffable hundreds of thousands of kotis, or nayutas, or dharma lands, all of whom had accomplished universal worthies practices and vows. Their profound determination and great vows had been brought to culmination. They traveled to wherever Buddhas appeared in the world and requested them to turn the wheel of Dharma. They were well able to accept and uphold the Buddha's Dharma, so the lineage of Buddhas would not be discontinued. They well knew the Buddha's appearances in the world and their predictions of sequential attainment of Buddhahood, such as their names and countries, their attainment of proper awakening, and their turning of the wheel or Dharma. In the worlds without Buddhas, they appeared and became Buddhas, enabling defiled beings to attain purity. They were able to eradicate the karmic hindrances that bodhisattvas encountered and to enter the Dharma realm, pure and unobstructed.
At that point, universal worthy Bodhisattva Mahasattva entered the vast and great samadhi called Buddha flower adornment. While in this samadhi, all the worlds in the 10 directions quaked and trembled in 6 ways in an array of 18 faces, producing a booming sound that all could hear. When he emerged from samadhi, universal wisdom Bodhisattva, knowing that the assembly had gathered, asked universal worthy Bodhisattva these questions.
Disciple of the Buddha, it is our wish that you speak to us. What kinds of reliance does a Bodhisattva Mahasattva take? What are his wondrous and special thoughts? What are his practices? What are his kinds of good spiritual advisors? What are his ways of applying diligence and vigor? What are his ways of attaining peace of mind? What are his ways of bringing beings to accomplishment? What are his kinds of precepts? What are his ways of knowing for himself that he will receive a prediction? What are his ways of entering the realm of a bodhisattva? What are his ways of entering the realm of a tathagata? What are his ways of penetrating the activities of beings? What are his ways of entering worlds? What are his ways of entering kalpas? What are his ways of speaking about the 3 periods of time? What are his ways of entering the 3 periods of time? What are his ways of making tireless resolves? What are his kinds of discerning wisdom? What are his kinds of dharanis? Of what kinds of Buddhas does he speak?
What are his ways of making a resolve like universal worthies? What are his ways of practicing universal worthies conduct? What are his ways of bringing forth great compassion? What are his causes and conditions for making the resolve for Bodhi? What are his ways of revering good spiritual advisors? What are his kinds of purity? What are his kinds of paramitas? What are his kinds of wisdom that align with awakening? What are his kinds of certified knowledge? What are his kinds of powers? What are his kinds of equalities? What are his ways of expressing the true meaning of the Buddha Dharma? What are his ways of speaking Dharma? What are his ways of sustaining? What are his kinds of eloquence? What are his kinds of self-mastery? What are his kinds of inclination toward non-attachment? What are his kinds of impartial minds? What are his ways of developing wisdom? What are his ways of transforming?
What are his supporting powers? What are his ways of feeling great joy and reassurance? What are his ways of profoundly entering into the Buddha Dharma? What are his kinds of reliance? What are his ways of making fearless resolves? What are his ways of making resolves that are free of doubt? What are his kinds of inconceivability? What are his kind of ingenious and enigmatic expressions? What are his kinds of skillful discerning wisdom? What are his ways of entering samadhi? What are his kinds of complete entry? What are his kinds of doors of liberation? What are his kinds of spiritual powers? What are his kinds of clear insight? What are his kinds of liberation? What are his kinds of gardens? What are his kinds of palaces? What are his kinds of daylight? What are his kinds of adornment? What are his kinds of unwavering resolves? What are his kinds of vast and profound resolve that he never forsakes? What are his kinds of wise contemplation? What are his ways of explaining about dharmas? What are his kinds of purity? What are his kinds of seals? What are his kinds of illumination due to wisdom? What are his kinds of peerless abidings? What are his kinds of noble minds? What are his kinds of resolve that rise like a mountain? What are his kind of ocean like wisdom that leads him to unsurpassed beauty?
What are his joy like abiding? What are his Raja like Mahayana resolves? What are his great aspirations? What are his ultimate great tasks? What are his indestructible faiths? What are his ways of receiving predictions? What are his ways of transferring roots of goodness? What are his ways of attaining wisdom? What are his ways of bringing forth measureless, boundless, vast, and great resolves? What are his hidden treasuries? What are his precepts and deportment? What are his self-masteries? What are his unimpeded functions? What are his unimpeded functions with respect to beings? What are his impeded functions with respect to lands? What are his unimpeded functions with respect to dharmas? What are his unimpeded functions with respect to bodies? What are his unimpeded functions with respect to vows? What are his impeded functions with respect to states? What are his unimpeded functions of wisdom? What are his unimpeded functions of spiritual penetrations? What are his unimpeded functions of spiritual powers? What are his unimpeded functions of powers? What are his kinds of playful roaming? What are his kinds of states? What are his powers? What are his fearlessnesses? What are his unique qualities? What are his deeds? What are his bodies?
What are his kinds of physical activities? What are his kinds of body? What are his kind of speech? What are his ways of purifying speech, karma? What are his ways of receiving protection? What are his kinds of great tasks? What are his kinds of mind? What are his kinds of results? What are his kinds of all-pervasive minds? What are his kinds of roots? What are his kinds of profound minds? What are his kinds of ascending profound minds? What are his kinds of diligent cultivation? What are his kinds of decisive understandings? What are his kinds of decisive understandings of worlds? What are his kind of decisive understanding of the realms of beings? What are his habits? What are his graspings? What are his kinds of cultivation? What are his accomplishments in the Buddha Dharma? What are his kinds of regression from the Buddha Dharma? What are his paths for transcending the round of rebirth? What are his qualities of certainty? What are his ways of realizing the path of the Buddha Dharma? What are his titles that signify his great heroism? What are his ways that lead to the path? What are his immeasurable paths? What are his means that aid in cultivation? What are his paths of cultivation? What are his paths of adornment? What kinds of feet does he have? What kinds of hands does he have? What kinds of bodies does he have? What kinds of internal organs does he have? What kinds of hearts does he have? What kinds of armor does he have? What kinds of weapons does he have? What kinds of heads does he have? What kinds of eyes does he have? What kinds of ears does he have? What kinds of noses does he have? What kinds of tongues does he have? What kinds of bodies does he have? What kinds of minds does he have? What kinds of walking does he have? What kinds of standing does he have? What kinds of sitting does he have? What kinds of reclining does he have? What kinds of abodes does he have? What kinds of promenades does he have?
What kinds of observations does he have? What kinds of universal observation does he have? What kinds of vigorous swiftness does he have? What kinds of lion's roars does he have? What kinds of pure giving does he have? What kinds of pure precepts does he have? What kinds of pure patience does he have? What kind of pure vigor does he have? What kinds of pure concentration does he have? What kinds of pure wisdom does he have? What kind of pure kindness does he have? What kinds of pure compassion does he have? What kinds of pure joy does he have? What kinds of pure equanimity does he have? What kinds of principles does he have? What kinds of dharma does he have? What kinds of tools that aid the cultivation of blessings and virtue does he have? What kinds of tools that aid the cultivation of wisdom does he have? What kinds of perfect brilliance does he have? What kinds of quests for Dharma does he have? What kinds of illumination does he have? What kinds of practice does he have? What kinds of demons of which he must be wary? What kinds of demonic influences of which he must be wary? What kinds of demonic deeds must he avoid? What kinds of Buddhas does he behold? What kinds of Buddha work does he do? What kinds of arrogant acts does he recognize? What kinds of wise deeds does he accomplish? What are his ways of encountering demonic possessions? What are his ways of being gathered in and supported by the Buddha? What are his ways of being gathered in and supported by the Dharma?
What kinds of deeds does he perform while dwelling in the Tushita heaven? What kinds of events are revealed when his life in the Tushita heaven is about to end? Why does he manifest dwelling in the womb? What kinds of subtle events does he reveal? Why does he manifest being born? Why does he manifest a smile? Why does he show the walking of 7 steps? Why does he appear as a youth? Why does he manifest living in a palace? Why does he manifest the renouncing of secular life? Why does he manifest the practice of austerities? How does he go to the Bodhi Mandala? How does he sit at the Bodhi Mandala? What kinds of extraordinary events take place while he is sitting at the Bodhi Mandala? Why does he manifest the conquering of demons? What kinds of power of the Tathagata does he achieve? How does he turn the wheel of Dharma? Why does he cause beings to attain purity when he turns the wheel of Dharma? Why does the Tathagata, one worthy of offerings and one of equal and proper awakening, manifest Parinirvana? Good indeed, disciple the Buddha. Please explain all such dharmas to us. At that time, universal worthy Bodhisattva said to universal wisdom and the other Bodhisattvas.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 kinds of reliance. What are the 10? They are as follows. He takes the Bodhi mind as one kind of reliance, for he can never forget it. He takes good spiritual advisor as one kind of reliance, for he can be one with them in harmony. He takes fruits of goodness as one kind of reliance, for he can cultivate, accumulate, and nourish them. He takes paramitas as one kind of reliance, for he can perfect them. He takes Dhamma as one kind of reliance, for he can gain ultimate transcendence. He takes great vows as one kind of reliance, for he can develop Bodhi. He takes practices as one kind of reliance, for he can accomplish every aspect of his cultivation. He takes bodhisattvas as one kind of reliance, for he can gain wisdom identical to theirs. He takes making offerings to Buddhas as one kind of reliance, for he can purify his faith. He takes Tathagatas as one kind of reliance, for they can teach him ceaselessly, like benevolent fathers can. These are the 10. If every bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, he would succeed in taking the Tathagata's unsurpassed great wisdom as reliance.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 kinds of wondrous and special thoughts. One other 10, they are as follows. He thinks of all roots of goodness as his own roots of goodness. He thinks of all roots of goodness as seeds of Bodhi. He thinks of all beings as vases of Bodhi. He thinks of all vows as his own vows. He thinks of all dharmas as transcendence. He thinks of all practices as his own practices. He thinks of all dharmas as Buddha dharmas. He thinks of all modes or languages as ways of verbal expression. He thinks of all Buddhas as benevolent fathers. He thinks of all Tathagatas as one. These are the 10. If every Bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, he would attain unsurpassed skillful thoughts.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva undertakes 10 kinds of practices. What are the 10? They are all practices regarding beings in order to bring them to maturity. All practices regarding the pursuit of Dharma in order to study and practice them all. All practices regarding roots of goodness in order to flourish them. All practices regarding samadhi in order to be single-minded without distraction. All practices regarding wisdom in order to comprehend everything. All practices regarding spiritual powers in order to make transformations with total ease. All practices regarding cultivation in order to accomplish them. All practices regarding the Buddha lands in order to adorn them. All practices regarding good friends in order to respect and make offerings to them. All practices regarding the Tathagatas in order to revere and serve them. These are the 10. If every bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, he would succeed in the practices of the Tathagata, practices that are aligned with the unsurpassed and great wisdom.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 kinds of good spiritual advisors. What are the 10? They are good spiritual advisors cause him to abide in the Bodhi resolve. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to give birth to roots of goodness. Good spiritual advisors who cause them to cultivate all paramitas. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to understand and explain all dharmas. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to lead all beings to maturity. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to attain definitive eloquence. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to detach from all worlds. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to tirelessly cultivate throughout the kalpas. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to abide in the conduct of universal worthy. Good spiritual advisors who cause him to enter where all Buddha's wisdom enters. These are the 10.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva applies 10 kinds of diligence and vigor. What are the 10? They are diligence and vigor in teaching to transform all beings, diligence and vigor in profoundly entering all dhammas, diligence and vigor in purely adorning all worlds, diligence and vigor in cultivating everything that the Bodhisattvas have learned, diligence and vigor in eliminating the misdeeds of all beings, diligence and vigor in stopping the sufferings of the 3 lowly paths, diligence and vigor in destroying all demons, diligence and vigor in serving as pure and clear eyes for all beings, diligence and vigor in making offerings to all Buddhas, diligence and vigor in pleasing all Tathagatas. These are the 10. If every bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, they will fully attain the paramitas of the Tathagatas, unsurpassed diligence and vigor.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 ways of attaining peace of mind. What are the 10? They are attaining peace of mind by abiding in and causing others to abide in the Bodhi resolve. Attaining peace of mind by ultimately freeing himself and others from anger and fighting. Attaining peace of mind by freeing himself and others from common and senseless dharmas. Attaining peace of mind by diligently cultivating and causing others to diligently cultivate roots of goodness. Attaining peace of mind by abiding in and causing others to abide in the path of the paramitas. Attaining peace of mind by being born in and causing others to be born in the Buddha's family. Attaining peace of mind by profoundly entering into and causing others to enter into the genuine Dharma and the nature of no self. attaining peace of mind by not slandering and causing others not to slander Buddha Dharmas, attaining peace of mind by fulfilling his Bodhi vows of all wisdom himself, and causing others to also fulfill their Bodhi vows of all wisdom, attaining peace of mind by profoundly entering into all the Tathagata's inexhaustible wisdom treasuries himself, and causing others to also enter into the Tathagata's inexhaustible wisdom treasuries. These are the 10. If every bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, he would attain the peace of the Tathagata's unsurpassed great wisdom.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 ways of bringing beings to accomplishment. What are the 10? They are bringing beings to accomplishment by giving, bringing beings to accomplishment by using his physical body, bringing beings to accomplishment by speaking Dharma, bringing beings to accomplishment by cultivating together with them, bringing beings to accomplishment by purity and non-attachment, bringing beings to accomplishment by lecturing and showing the Bodhisattva conduct, bringing beings to accomplishment by making a splendid appearance in all the worlds, bringing beings to accomplishment by the majestic virtue of the Buddha Dharma, bringing beings to accomplishment by various spiritual powers and manifestations, bringing beings to accomplishment by various subtle and skillful expedients. These are the 10. If these ways every bodhisattva brings the realm of beings to accomplishment.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva, upholds 10 kinds of precepts. What are the 10? They are the precept of not giving up the Bodhi resolve, the precept of leaving behind the 2 vehicles, the precept of observing and benefiting all beings, the precept of guiding all beings to dwell in the Buddha Dharma, the precept of cultivating everything that the Bodhisattvas have learned, the precept of understanding that in respect to dharmas, nothing is attained, the precept of dedicating all rules of goodness to Bodhi, the precept of not being attached to any other Tathagata's body, the precept of pondering dharmas and separating from grasping and clinging, the precepts of guarding the faculties by adhering to the precepts and proper deportments. These are the 10. If every bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these dharmas, he would attain the Tathagata's paramitas, unsurpassed great precepts.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 ways of knowing him for himself that he will receive a prediction. What are the 10? They are by making the resolve for Bodhi with an extraordinary will. He knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By never detesting and never giving up the Bodhisattva conduct, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By dwelling in all kalpas and cultivating the Bodhisattva conduct, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By cultivating Buddha Dhammas, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By having complete faith in the Buddha's teachings, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By cultivating all roots of goodness and bringing them to accomplishment, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By leading all beings toward the Buddha's Bodhi, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By harmonizing as one with all good spiritual advisors, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By thinking of all good spiritual advisors as Tathagatas, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. By persistently safeguarding his fundamental vows of Bodhi, he knows for himself that he will receive a prediction. These are the 10.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva has 10 ways of entering into the realm of Bodhisattvas. What are the 10? They are entering through past vows, entering through practice, entering through amassing roots of goodness, entering through parameters, entering through accomplishment, entering through different vows, entering through various understanding, entering through adorning Buddha lands, entering through the self-mastery of spiritual powers, entering through the manifestation of rebirth. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva universally enters into the realm of the bodhisattvas of the 3 periods of time.
Disciples of the Buddha, a bodhisattva, mahasattva has 10 ways of entering into the realm of Tathagatas. What are the 10? They are entering through boundless realization of perfect awakening, entering through boundless turning of the will of Dharma, entering through boundless experience means, entering through boundless different voices, entering through boundless taming of beings, entering through boundless self-masteries of spiritual powers, entering through boundless various different bodies, entering through boundless samadhis, entering through boundless powers and fearlessness, entering through boundless manifestations of nirvana. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva universally enters into the realm of the Tathagatas of the 3 periods of time.
Disciples of the Buddha, a bodhisattva mahasattva has 10 ways of penetrating the activities of beings. What are the 10? They are penetrating the past activities of all beings, penetrating the future activities of all beings, penetrating the present activities of all beings, penetrating the wholesome activities of all beings, penetrating the unwholesome activities of all beings, penetrating the mental activities of all beings, penetrating the activities of all beings' faculties, penetrating the activities of all beings' understandings, penetrating the activities of all beings' afflictions and habits, penetrating the activities of Buddha teaching for all beings. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva exhaustively enters into the activities of all beings.
Disciples of the Buddha, a bodhisattva mahasattva has 10 ways of entering worlds. What are the 10? They are by entering into contaminated worlds, by entering into the pure worlds, by entering into small worlds, by entering into large worlds, by entering into worlds within dust particles, by entering into subtle worlds, by entering into downward-facing worlds, by entering into upward-facing worlds, by entering into worlds where there are Buddhas, by entering into worlds where there are no Buddhas. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva universally enters into the worlds of the 3 periods of time.
Disciples of the Buddha, a bodhisattva mahasattva has 10 ways of entering into kalpas. What are the 10? They are by entering into past kalpas, by entering into future kalpas, by entering into present kalpas, by entering into countable kalpas, by entering into uncountable kalpas, by entering into countable kalpas, as if entering into uncountable kalpas, by entering into uncountable kalpas, as if entering into uncountable kalpas, by entering into all kalpas, as if entering into non-kalpas, by entering into non-kalpas, as if entering into all kalpas, by entering into all kalpas, as if entering into one thought. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva exhaustively enters into all kalpas.
Disciples of the Buddha, a bodhisattva mahasattva has 10 ways of speaking about the 3 periods of time. What are the 10? By speaking of the past period in the past period, by speaking of the future period in the past period, by speaking of the present period in the past period, by speaking the past period in the future period, by speaking of the present period into the future period, by speaking of endlessness in the future period, by speaking of the past period in the present period, by speaking of the future period in the present period, by speaking of equality in the present period, by speaking of the three periods of time as one thought in the present period. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva speaks extensively about the three periods of time.
Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva, has 10 ways of knowing the three periods of time. One after 10 they are: knowing the formation of all worlds, knowing the languages of all worlds, knowing the conversation of all worlds, knowing the rules of all worlds, knowing the names of all worlds, knowing the policies of all worlds, knowing the fictitious names of all worlds, knowing the abundance of all worlds, knowing the quiescence of all worlds, knowing the total emptiness of all worlds. These are the 10. By these, every bodhisattva thoroughly knows all the characteristics of the three periods of time. Disciples of the Buddha, a Bodhisattva Mahasattva brings forth 10 kinds of tireless resolve. One after 10 they are: the tireless resolve to make offerings and serve all Buddhas, the tireless resolve to draw close to good spiritual advisors, the tireless resolve to seek the Dharma, the tireless resolve to listen to the proper Dharma, the tireless resolve to speak and spread the proper Dharma, the tireless resolve to teach and transform all beings, the tireless resolve to lead all beings toward the Bodhi of the Buddhas, the tireless resolve to practice the Bodhisattva conduct in each and every world for an ineffable number of kalpas, the tireless resolve to travel to all worlds, the tireless resolve to contemplate and ponder all Buddha Dhammas. These are the 10. If every Bodhisattva were to abide peacefully in these Dhammas, he would attain the Tathagata's tireless, unsurpassed, and great wisdom. Namo Samanta Madana Balati Hada Jajana Ajimi Jimi Nanda Gadana Mowa Sante Balati Udan Modan Modanda Gadana Mowa Humpansa Namo Samanta Madana Balati Hada Jajana Ajimi Jimi Nanda Gadana Mowa Sante Balati Udan Modan Praise for the 8th Assembly. In the halls of universal light, the assembly fully cultivated gathers on a third occasion. From the vast of universal worthy, 2,000 answers cascade forth as a ship of kindness sails across the sea for suffering. A single phrase completely captures every meaning of the Dharma. Namo, ocean-wide flower adornment assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo, ocean-wide flower adornment assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Namo, ocean-wide flower adornment assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Special dedication. We hereby dedicate the merits and virtue of this practice. May all nations be peaceful, may all people be safe, and may the weather be seasonal with an appropriate amount of rain. May the merit from this practice adorn all the Buddha's lands, repay message sending, born together in the land of bliss. 3 vowels. Bow in respect to the Venerable Master. Nam mô Ta Phang Quang Phổ Hoa Ye Ji Hoa Ye Hai Hui Phổ Pu Sa